Turn to the person next to you and say, just how much more beautiful should I be? I'm certain we got various answers for that question. Good to see everybody this morning. Glad for the rain this morning. God knows what's best for us. So go home and watch your grass grow. It will grow because of this rain, I guarantee that. So, all right, good to see everybody here again this morning. Put on a smile like this. Grin real big at your teacher. Tell them you love them and appreciate them this morning. How's that? How's that? Okay, any announcements? All right, listen for the 2 bells. You're dismissed.
Good morning. Hey, Ed, I love you. Thank you. Love you too. We are to love one another, aren't we? As Christ loved the church. So thankful for the love of God. We don't see that in this lesson today. We don't see the love of God portrayed in this family. Some of it was kind of brought on by maybe some favoritism within the father of the family. But it just basically goes to prove I don't believe these older brethren were where they needed to be with the Lord at that particular time in their life. But as we're studying the beginning of the creation, and not only the creation, but the beginning of the nation of Israel, we see that there definitely had been some problems in Jacob's family, some situations. We studied the last couple of weeks about the daughter being sexually abused and the sons taking vengeance into their own hands and so forth. But we seen last week that God instructed Jacob to go back to Bethel. He needed to go back to the house of the Lord, the dwelling place of the Lord, and renew his commitment unto the Lord. And I think we still see some growth in Jacob, but yet we still see some things in his life that probably wasn't totally what he should have been. And again, that's showing some favoritism. And again, it's hard to say that Jacob was wrong because it appears all this is in the will of God, as in Joseph's life and so forth. So, even though some of the circumstances of life is not always what we want it to be, and we may go through some situations that we don't understand, so forth. But when we look back at the whole picture, when we get back to the end of our life and we see how God has steered us through some tragedies and some situations and we may not have understood at the particular time, we can see how God worked through those things. So even though this wasn't the perfect situation, I believe Joseph was the man that God wanted in this position. Now, again, the circumstances may not have been, Joseph wouldn't have picked these circumstances, I'm sure. But even though these circumstances happened in his life, God worked through those circumstances and again blessed him as he went through life, as we'll see as we study the concluding chapters of the book of Genesis here. So aren't you thankful that God, even though things don't work out the way we think they should, that God is still able to guide us through those trying times in our life and basically bless us in those situations as we go through. May not always been pleasant, been thrown in prison, being accused of trying to come on to another man's wife. All those things weren't pleasant. Being thrown in a pit, as we see in today's lesson, be sold into slavery, those things weren't pleasant in Joseph's life. But later on, I think we're going to read where Joseph said, hey, the hand of the Lord was in this. And because of this, he was able not only to save Jacob and his family, but all those in Egypt and the communities round about, through and by his wisdom and the knowledge that God had given him, become the second in command in Egypt, basically. And then this great nation of Israel was allowed to grow and prosper in the land. But then God, what? Had to send some tribulation to them to make them want to get out of there. See, sometimes we get into the world, we don't want to leave the world. But God sent some trying times again to the Egyptian people, as we'll see later on in the book of Exodus, and how he basically caused the hardships and so forth to make them want to leave. And sometimes that's the way God does with us. Ken even mentioned here, I think, maybe it was in last Sunday's message, about we don't preach or talk much about old-time conviction anymore, dying out to sin. But sometimes God has to put some difficulties, hardships in our life to make us want to flee or separate ourselves from this old worldly system. So that's what happened with Israel again. Most of you know the history of it, but it's just good to be reminded of it from time to time as we go through. Andy, if you would, lead us in a word of prayer.
Lord, gracious and Father, we just thank and praise you for another privilege to be in your house this morning, Father. We just ask now for your blessing to be upon Brother Ed, Father. As we look into your lesson, Father, look to your word, Father, we just pray that we draw closer to you, have a better understanding of it, dear Lord. Father, we just also ask that you be with the after service, Father, be with the one that brings the message, dear Lord. Father, we pray if there's someone here, Father, in our midst today that will be lost, Father, that today will be the day they come to know you, Savior and King. We ask all this thing in Jesus' name. Amen.
Again, be much in prayer for Mick and Sharon. We just sprung some news on them that they didn't know. They've been out of town, I guess, over the weekend or whatever, and one of their son's houses lives right down below Marge, caught on fire Friday night and burnt. Basically, I think the house is more or less destroyed. And we was mentioning it to Mick and Sharon about how sorry it was, and they didn't even know it. So that's the reason they just left to go up and check on their children and grandchildren. So be much in prayer for them. The fracturing of a family is the title of this lesson today. Again, some of it may have been self-inflicted, as I've already said, that caused some of the difficulties within families, but it does, as in the day and age in which we live, it doesn't take a whole lot to fracture family relationships anymore, it seems. It seems like there's things in this life that will cause families to split, and animosity builds and so forth between them. And this was happening in Jacob's family at this time. It said, and Jacob dwelt in the land wherein his father was a stranger, in the land of Canaan. Again, after they had come back and had met his brother Esau and so forth, and then they were at Shechem and the problems there, he had actually got back to Bethel. So he was actually dwelling now in the land where Abraham and Isaac had dwelt. It said, and these are the generations of Jacob. Joseph, being 17 years old, was feeding the flock with his brethren, and the lad was with his sons of Bilhah and with the sons of Zilpah, his father's wife, and Joseph brought unto his father their evil report. So, again, the sons were out. Again, Jacob had been blessed. God had truly blessed him. He had great herds and great flocks and so forth. And so, Joseph, being 17 at this particular time, one of the youngest, Benjamin, had just been born not too soon before this event actually took place, I believe. But he was 17 years old at this time, and so his father had him out in the field being a shepherd with his older brothers, the brothers of the handmaids that Rachel and Leah had given unto Jacob to produce children. And so they were half-brothers. And I know some, ever heard the expression like a redheaded stepchild or whatever, I think that's kind of what was actually taking place somewhat within this family. There was some animosity there, as I think there would be if you've got 4 wives. And you know what I'm saying? And there would be some jealousy amongst the children. And so there was definitely people were jealous of Joseph because he was Jacob's favorite child, because Rachel was his favorite wife. And so this favoritism had built, and there had caused some animosity. Now he's out in the field with his stepbrothers, or his half-brothers, and he comes back in and he gives his father an evil report. We don't know what the report was, but the older brothers must have done something that caught Joseph's attention, and he comes back and he tells Jacob about it. Now, again, this causes some hardship within the family as well. We've got a little tattletale brother here. He's telling everything that we do. So that caused some animosity within the family. Now it says in verse 3, now Israel, which is Jacob, loved Joseph more than all his children, because he was the son of his old age. According to what we can read, Jacob was almost 90 years old by the time Joseph was born. So he was a son of his old age. But again, he lived to be 147, I believe. So you might say he was kind of in the prime of his life. But to him, to Jacob himself, he felt like he was an old man at that particular time. And so he loved Joseph. Again, he was the son of his favorite wife as well. And it said he made him a coat of many collars. So he had given Joseph this garment, outer cloak, coat, whatever you want to call it. And I'm sure it was made of a very fine material. And I'm sure it was some of the finest stitch work probably that could have been made at that particular time, of various collars within the coat. And it basically showed the rest of the family that Joseph is my chosen one. Now, again, we had older sons, and usually the eldest received a double portion of the inheritance of the family and so forth at the death of the father, the blessing as well. But it appears here Joseph had already been chosen by Jacob or by Israel at this time to be the heir, basically. And this displeased the rest of the children, or the rest of the sons anyway. It said, and when his brethren saw that their father loved him more than all his brethren, they hated him and could not speak peaceably unto him. So again, because of this favoritism of Jacob unto Joseph, it caused this animosity within the rest of the sons. It says they hated him. They couldn't even speak peaceably. They couldn't even have a genuine conversation with him. They didn't even want to be around him, it appears, because of this hatred and animosity toward him. And it said, and Joseph dreamed a dream, and he told it to his brother, and they hated him yet the more. Now, it doesn't say, and I don't think Joseph was bragging about this dream. I think he was just trying to be cordial to his brothers and tell them, hey, I had a dream last night, and this is what I dreamed. But again, what was the dream?
I think he kind of approached them in a way that I don't think he was bragging to them, but in their eyes, he said, here comes this little tattletale.
Yeah.
What are you going to do now?
Yeah.
So they're not going to take it good no matter what he said or how he said it.
It's hard enough being a little brother, our little brother, so I know exactly. Especially with everything else going on here.
So he dreamed this dream. So he told his brothers, and yet they hated him more. And he said unto them, hear, I pray you, the dream which I have dreamed. For behold, we were binding sheaves in the field, and lo, my sheaf rose and stood upright. And behold, your sheaves stood round about and made obeisance unto my sheaf. He said, this is a dream that I had last night. He said, I don't really understand it, but here's what I dreamed. And he said, we were out in the field and we were binding sheaves, cutting grain and putting them into bundles. When I was around probably 20, 21 years old, working at Nancy Ray supermarket in Wheelersburg, Ray Little bought this old, if you know Ray, he loved antiques and various other things. He bought this old steam tractor. Anybody been to the... Anyway, Carl Bauer was one of the managers of the store, and he asked some of us guys that worked there, he said, hey, how about coming Sunday afternoon? We're going to take this old tractor out to a field somewhere. It was out on a lick run. And we're going to cut some wheat with this old tractor and bind sheaves of wheat. And we went out there and we done that. And I can't remember what we'd done with the sheaves. I remember picking them up and we was loading them on a wagon after we'd bundle them up. After this machine, I don't even remember what the machine was, but it would cut it and bind these sheaves. And then they probably took them down for one of the old-fashioned days there where the old flea market is now and put on some kind of a threshing or something during that particular week. But I don't remember what they done. But I remember binding sheaves of wheat. And that's what he said. We were doing this. And he said, my sheaf all of a sudden stood up and all your sheaves bowed and began almost to worship me. And again, I don't think he was saying this braggingly. I think he was just telling them what he dreamed. I mean, Terry dreams some of the craziest dreams I've ever heard of. And, when she gets up in the morning, she's actually dreamed and woke up mad at me. Because she dreamed that I was flirting with some woman or something, and she'd actually be mad, Sometimes we dream crazy things. And so I think he was just telling his brothers what he dreamed. I don't think he was boasting about, hey, I'm going to be ruler over you. But I think he was just telling them these things. But yet when he did, they hated him the more. And they basically said, and his brethren said to him, shall thou indeed reign over us? Little brother, you think you're going to reign over us is basically what they said. Or shalt thou indeed have dominion over us? And they hated him yet the more for his dreams and for his words. And he dreamed yet another dream. And he told it his brethren and said, behold, I have dreamed a dream more. And behold, the sun, the moon, and the 11 stars made obeisance unto me. He said, I had another dream. And he said, I dreamed even the sun and the moon and the 11 stars. And so again, how many brothers are there? There's 11 brothers now. Benjamin been born. And the 11 stars made obeisance unto me, or bowed unto me. And he told it to his father and to his brethren, and his father rebuked him. So old Jacob rebuked him and said unto him, what is this dream that thou hast dreamed? Shall I and thy mother and thy brethren indeed come to bow down ourselves to thee, to this earth? Even Jacob kind of rebuked him at this time and said, wait a minute, son, what do you think you're doing here? What do you think you're saying here? But see, Joseph was a type of Christ, probably the closest thing we have to a type of Christ in the Old Testament. He was a shepherd. The Lord is our shepherd, isn't he? He went to his own brethren received him not, just as Christ came into his own, and his own received him not. So Joseph was a prophet. Christ was a prophet. Joseph was making prophecies here that will come true and will come to pass Even though as a 17-year-old lad, he had no idea what his future may hold. But again, I believe when Jacob rebuked him, because it says in the next verse, his brother didn't enter him, but his father observed the same. I believe old Jacob had enough spiritual knowledge about him. He began to think, is the Lord working in this lad's life? What are we seeing here? It said Jacob noticed or paid attention, observed what he was truly saying. But I believe in the blindness of Jacob's love for his son, he really didn't realize the hatred that the other sons had toward him. Or I don't believe he would have done what he done in these next few verses. So it says his brothers went to feed their father's flock in Shechem. And Israel said unto Joseph, do not thy brethren feed the flock in Shechem? Come, and I will send thee unto them. And he said to him, here am I. Again, the obedience of Joseph to his father, willing to do whatever he said to do. But again, because of this coat or beautiful coat that he had, I believe he was favored as far as the work goes as well. You know, he probably didn't have as hard a job as some of the older sons and so forth did. And we're going to notice here he wears this beautiful coat as he goes to meet his brother. And so it doesn't appear that this was something that would be worn while you're doing a lot of physically hard labor. So Jacob says, go check on your brothers. They've taken the flock over near Shechem. When this kind of puzzled me that they would even go back over there after they had already problems they had a few months or maybe a year before that, but that's where they were headed, that direction. He said, here am I, Father. And he said, go, I pray thee, and see whether it be well with thy brethren and well with the flocks, and bring me word again. So he sent him out to the vale of Hebron, and he came to Shechem. And a certain man found him. Behold, he was wandering in the field, and the man asked him, saying, what seekest thou? And he said, I seek my brethren. Tell me, I pray thee, where they feed their flocks. He said, I'm looking for my brethren. He said, they're out here with the herds and flocks somewhere, and they were supposed to be in this area, but I can't find them. It said, the man said, they are departed hence, for I heard them say, let us go to Dothan. And Joseph went after his brethren and found them in Dothan. And when they saw him afar off, even before he came near unto them, they conspired against him to slay him. Again, another example of how he typifies Christ. Christ came into his own, what the own conspired to do, to slay him, to kill him. And that's what happened. They saw Joseph coming. He was easy to spot. He was wearing his coat of many collars. So they knew that it was him. Their hatred had boiled over and now into, let's kill him. Let's just do away with him. Father favors him. He's going to bless him. He's going to give him his blessing and his inheritance. We can see that's happening even now. So he said, let's just do away with it. We'll see whether these dreams will come to pass and so forth. So they conspired to slay him. And they said one to another, behold, this dreamer cometh. Come now therefore, and let us slay him and cast him into some pit. And we will say, some evil beast hath devoured him, and we shall see what will become of his dreams. We'll see what happens. We'll just slay him. We'll cast him into a dried up well or a pit. We'll take that coat. We'll kill an animal. We'll say some animal has slain him and devoured him and so forth. So what does sin do? Sin grows, don't it? Yep. Hatred grows into murder. I mean, isn't it heartbreaking when we see? I mean, it's every day when we look just our local news, let alone national news. What was it they said last year? More children died by guns than any other means? That's hard to believe, isn't it? But that's what's happening in our world today. People are violent. They let the sin that's in their life go and grow into murder and don't think anything about it. Sad situation here with his family here. One of their own blood brothers they've conspired to slay. But Reuben heard it. Well, let's give Reuben a little credit anyway. He wasn't a saint himself, but at least he had a little bit of scruples about him. He heard it. And he delivered him out of their hands and said, let us not kill him. And Reuben said unto him, shed no blood, but cast him into this pit that is in this wilderness, and lay no hand upon him, that he might rid him out of their hands to deliver him to their father again. So Reuben had this plan. He said, he finally talked to his brother and said, don't shed no blood. Even he knew that was wrong. He said, just cast him into a pit. Let him starve to death is basically what he's suggesting. Cast him into this pit. But Reuben had thoughts about after they move on, then he would go back and rescue him out of this pit and take him back to his father. So Reuben at least had some feelings again for Joseph. And he didn't want them to be guilty of murder, basically. And it came to pass when Joseph was come unto his brethren, and they stripped Joseph out of his coat of many collars that was on him, and they took him and cast him into a pit, and the pit was empty. There was no water in it. So it was either some type of cistern or probably a dug well that was dry during the summer months. Something that he couldn't get out of. So they cast him down into this pit. And then look what they did. And they sat down to eat bread. Now you just cast your brother into a hole or a well or whatever to die. And what they do? They just sit down to eat. Isn't that the way society is today? I mean, they'll commit the most horrific crime in the world and like nothing ever happened. Sit down to eat. Probably a meal that Joseph had brought to them from their father, probably.
And I never will forget, a good friend of mine, Mike Jericho, he went through a bitter divorce. Mike wasn't saved at the time, and I was witnessing him one night with his good night. And I never will forget what he said to me, and he meant it. He said, Kenny, I can't get saved. And I said, why? He said, I could cut my ex-wife's throat and sit down and eat breakfast. And I said, Mike, surely you don't mean that. But I did, and a year or two later, I was preaching revival thing with Ball off, and I got to see him saved. He's remarried and lived a good life, but I never will forget it. I thought, boy, you really have to come to a place of bad
Yeah.
hatred to do that, or even say that.
Yep. But they sat down to eat. And they lifted up their eyes and looked, and behold, a company of Ishmaelites came from Gilead with their camels bearing spicery and balm and myrrh, going to carry it down to Egypt. And Judah said unto his brethren, What profit us if we slay our brother and conceal his blood? Come, let us sell him to the Ishmaelites, and let not our hand be upon him, for he is our brother and our flesh. And his brother were content. So, first we had Reuben speaking up. Now we have Judah speaking up. He said, maybe we shouldn't just let him die, have his blood upon us. Let's just sell him. We see this band of merchants headed down toward Egypt. Let's sell him as a slave. And that way his blood won't be on our hands, so to speak. And again, they were content with that. So they did that. These merchants come by and they sold Joseph for 20 pieces of silver. Again, much like our Lord and Savior being sold for 30 pieces of silver by his own people, the own Jewish people as well. And so there passed by the Midianites merchantmen, and they drew and lifted up Joseph out of the pit and sold Joseph to the Ishmaelites for 20 pieces of silver, and they brought Joseph into Egypt. So again, Joseph, what do you think he was doing while he was in the pit? You think he was just being quiet? Well, I believe we can go over and I think it's the 42nd chapter of Genesis when he's meeting his brother, when his brother comes to Egypt to buy corn. One of them even says, oh, how our soul longed when he was crying. I believe he was crying out of this pit. Wow. Hey, don't do this to me. Yeah. Don't do this to me. His crying unto his brother. They're sitting around eating, ignoring the pleas. But yet those cries, when they were in Egypt and Joseph told him, said, go back and bring Benjamin. And they say, oh, we can't do that. That's our father's favorite son now. We can't do that. Then they remembered the cries, I believe, that Joseph was making out of the pit, even though they didn't realize that was Joseph at the time. But I don't believe he sat there quietly and let them enjoy their meal. I believe he was crying unto them, get me out of this thing.
When I was unsaved, my brother, I was in a situation where I did one of the dumbest things that I have ever done in my entire life. And everybody else, nobody said a word. My brother, he was the only one who said anything, and my brother was a banker. He went, oh. Man, that word gutted me for years. Mm. So that's real. This is real. This is great teaching. You're doing good.
So now Reuben returns to the pit to get his brother out. Save him out of this pit and take him back to his father. Where Reuben had gone, it doesn't say, but he had probably gone into a nearby village, maybe to get some supplies or something. I don't know. It doesn't say. But Reuben returned, and behold, Joseph was not in the pit, and rent his clothes. Again, that was a sign of mourning or grief or whatever, to rent one's clothes when they have something, tragedy happen in their life. And he returned unto his brethren and said, the child is not. He's not there. Did he escape? Did you carry out what you was thinking earlier? He's inquiring from them. And behold, Joseph was not in the pit, and he returned unto the brethren and said, the child is not, and I, whither shall I go? What am I going to do now? Is what Reuben's basically asking. What do we do now? I had this plan. I was going to rescue him. I was going to take him back to Dad. But now what have you done? So I'm sure they told him what they had done, how that they had sold him into slavery So now how are we going to approach Father? Have you done something in your life and you wonder how you're even going to approach God about it? Are you so ashamed or so embarrassed you hate to even go to God in prayer and ask about it or pray about it? I believe that's where the brothers were here. Now what do we do? What do we do? And he took Joseph's coat, killed a kid of the goats, and dipped the coat in blood. And they sent the coat of many collars, and they brought it to their father and said, "This have we found. Know now whether it be thy son's coat or no." So they dip the coat in blood. They take it back or send it back to Jacob and said, "Is this Joseph's coat? We found it." Deceiving. Remember, Jacob had been the deceiver. But hopefully by now he had matured somewhat. Now again, he's being deceived by his own sons as well. It said he knew it and said, "It is my son's coat. An evil beast hath devoured him. Joseph is without doubt rent in pieces." My favorite son, the one that I favored among you all, is gone. He's dead. There's no doubt in my mind that he's been devoured by a beast. Had no clue that his own sons could have done this unto his son. And Jacob rent his clothes and put sackcloth on his loins and mourned for his son many days. And look at verse 35. And all his sons and all his daughters rose up to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted. And he said, "For I will go down into the grave unto my son mourning." Thus his father wept for him. Now here's his other sons and his children trying to console him for the mourning that he's, grief that he's going through, and still deceiving him. You know, there's a TV show I watch. It's kind of violent, but it's called Criminal Minds. And on that show, one of the FBI agents that's on that show, they killed her off on the show. But they really didn't kill her off. They just, they had a funeral, they had the whole bit. All the rest of the team thought she was dead and gone and all this, and they had their mourning and all this, and then all of a sudden one day she shows back up, and there was a lot of mixed emotions when she showed back up. Some of them were angry. You let us go through this mourning process? And that's what these sons had to do. They had to go through the mourning process with their father and even knowing that he's not dead. So again, the guilt. But was there enough guilt to cause repentance? No. And that's what it seems like in our society today. People are not really, as I mentioned earlier, they're not convicted of their sin anymore. And they sure don't die out to sin. But these sons had to play the part as well that they had lost their brother when they knew truly what they had done, and then in turn try to comfort their father in this endeavor. But he refused to be comforted. He said, "I'll go down to my grave mourning for my son." I think that's probably the hardest thing a parent has to go through. I don't know how many times I've been in a funeral home or whatever talking with somebody that's lost a child, and they always seem to say, "We're supposed to die before them."
Yeah. My mom buried my older sister. She was the firstborn. Bad situation. My dad beat her. She delivered. She had to bury her. She lived 9 hours. And I was talking to her one time. she said, Michael Dale, she said, you never recover from the death of a child. And she must have seen me, the wheels smoking as I was looking. She said, never. I was like, whoa.
Yeah.
So she speaks it from the voice of authority.
Yep.
And
It has to be. Has to be. I mean, it's hard to lose your parents. It's hard to lose a sibling, a spouse, but a child. Jacob grieved greatly and was trying to be comforted, but could not, even from these sons that hated Joseph. It said, and the Midianites sold him into Egypt and to Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh and captain of the guard. So the next few weeks we're going to be studying about Joseph up and down. It doesn't matter if he's in Potiphar's home. It doesn't matter if he was in prison. It doesn't matter if he was in Pharaoh's court. God blessed him. God took care of him. And God will take care of us. We may go through some situations, as I said earlier, that's not pleasant, not easy to go through. But when we look back, you know, if we just go back now and look at what God has brought us through in our life, maybe it's in your family, maybe it's in your marriage, maybe it's in your job. You know, situations that have happened down through the time, we can look back and see how God worked out situations that we didn't know how he worked out. You know, when I got transferred to Cincinnati, well, you know, I mean, we were looking for houses. We were making offers on houses, and everything I made an offer on, nobody would take. Nobody seemed to be interested in my house when I put it on the market, and you think, well, what's going to happen, you know? But the Lord worked it out, and I didn't have to move. I mean, it's just the way the Lord works. So, I thank the Lord every day for what he's done for me, what he's going to do for me. He's going to take me to heaven if I stay true and faithful to him. We couldn't ask for a better blessing than that. But I'm thankful he not only is going to bless us in the life after, he's blessing us now. Amen. He's taking care of us now. God bless you.